Let's start with Barr and, of course, this testimony that was released. This is important, what I'm reading of James Baker's closed-door testimony.
Oh, it is, because it lends sustenance to the notion that this was a political move by the FBI to clear Hillary Clinton. Baker determined initially that she committed crimes, and he argued vociferously until James Comey and Peter Strzok and Lisa Page, and then the Department of Justice told him, no, we're not going to prosecute. We're setting a brand new standard that we are inventing that does not exist in the law, an intense standard for gross negligence. And so it's abundantly clear from his testimony the fix was in to clear Clinton.
Add one other point, and that was Page and Strzok's testimony behind closed doors that was revealed thanks to Doug Collins. And we learned in that case, we're not making any decisions. All of these decisions on Hillary are being made by the Attorney General Loretta Lynch, and we all know that they're Hillary supporters and nothing's going to happen.
Lisa Page said every decision they made in the Hillary Clinton case was being dictated to them by Loretta Lynch's Department of Justice in the Obama administration. And Peter Strzok said the same thing.
Yep. Beyond that, by the way, you have that side of the equation. You have all of the unbelievable things that were done, decisions made with respect to Hillary Clinton. But what Baker's testimony also gives you is the other side of the equation as to the complete anti-Trump bias that was going on around the office. Some of the things that are so important in his testimony are his description of the mood around the department, that so many higher-ups were concerned that the firing of Comey could constitute obstruction of justice, let alone any separation of power arguments never occurred to them, or that Comey served at the president's discretion. And beyond that, we know from Baker now that there was serious talk about the invocation of this 25th Amendment, this absolute circus idea to get rid of Donald Trump, that the taping of the president was a real thought, and this was all discussed by McCabe and others, and that it was a serious thing, despite what Rod Rosenstein now says.
He talks about Clinton election bias. He's asked a very important question, I think. About, on the face of it, it appeared that there was some language that could be interpreted very pro-one candidate. This is the question to James Baker. Very anti-another candidate. That would be bias. That you took the initiative, it's my understanding, to request the FBI's internal inspection mechanisms take a look at the mid-year case, the Hillary case, to see what might be right with it, wrong with it. Could you elaborate? That's something we haven't heard a whole lot about. And he said, yeah, I'm looking at the Inspector General report right now in front of me, and there's discussion in there. So when I heard about those texts, meaning Strzok and Page, I only read a few of them. They were described to me, and I became immediately quite alarmed. And so my thinking was, well, from, okay, I don't know, I know that, I knew that. Inspector General was looking at them, but I knew they would address them. And so I knew that there was a process in place where he goes on to say, and what I was concerned about is whether any decision had been taken or not taken in the mid-year case, and whether they were driven by political bias of any sort. I was quite worried about it. I wanted to make sure that we as an institution, the Bureau as an institution, got on top of this extremely quickly. I suggested the leadership form a committee, sensitive. So he saw what was the favoring of one candidate over another.
Oh, absolutely. And Baker's testimony is blockbuster. It reveals not only pro-Hillary Clinton bias at the FBI and the Department of Justice to absolve her of the many crimes she committed, but also that in the Russian investigation of Donald Trump, that it too was being driven by this hate Trump bias in the media, exhibited at the FBI, exhibited by Peter Strzok and Lisa Page's texts. It was abnormal. Protocols were not being followed. And I must tell you that the headline for me today from William Barr is that he testified he will and is personally reviewing the Trump-Russia investigation, the origin of it, and the conduct of the people involved, meaning James Comey, Andrew McCabe, Peter Strzok, Lisa Page, James Baker, as well as the 5 individuals at the Department of Justice who signed off on this phony wiretap warrant lying to the court.
What do you say to that, David? I mean, and then you add to the fact that he was asked very specifically whether or not he thought Hillary and her campaign committed a crime on the email server, and he said yes. And then
did nothing about it, quite frankly. This man was general counsel at the FBI. Very high, important responsibility. He had an obligation that if he saw action had to be taken and no action were taken, he had to go to the Attorney General. The Attorney General wouldn't act. He had a minimum. He had to report this to the Inspector General at the time, but he probably had an obligation to go even to the President, maybe to go someplace else. He had an obligation to affirmatively act in this case.
He could go to Congress.
He could go to Congress, absolutely. There's an oversight opportunity to go to there. That door is open, but he didn't. And so that speaks volumes. But again, it's part of this atmosphere. It was this hate Trump and playing politics in the Department of Justice like we've never seen, and carried to its full extension what some clearly had in mind was, for the first time that I'm aware of in history, this attempted coup, an actual attempted coup in this use of the 25th Amendment. And Baker says it was serious talk.
And, one step further, there are whistleblower statutes in place to protect somebody like Baker. He can go to Congress. He can blow the whistle on the corruption at the FBI and the Department of Justice. He has a legal obligation as general counsel to do that. He would be protected. He didn't do it, which makes him complicit in the corruption.
Right? Doesn't that, you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, he had the obligation to do it, and he didn't do it. Listen, the opportunity to have Mr. Barr in there is what people have said they've been waiting for here. There was nobody at the helm before. It's his obligation now to take these things seriously and to take seriously referrals from Congress. Mr. Nunes and others have thought carefully about who to refer and why to refer them, and they backed it all up with evidence. No one's guessing here about what happened. It has to be investigated.
And Barr will do it. I am absolutely confident. This is the second time he said he will do it.
So you think now this is a whole new ballgame?
It is. Totally new ballgame. Barr is an honest and honorable man who cares deeply about the rule of law, and when he says, give me the predicate, the reasons, the facts, the evidence to launch a full-scale investigation of alleged corruption at the FBI and the Department of Justice, I believe he will do it.
All right, we'll take a quick break. We'll come back. We'll have more on this. We got Devin Nunes. Well, that means we've got criminal referrals coming this week. Okay, everyone's going to get the full Mueller report. That's coming within a week. Then we've got a cascade of information that we will be getting. More closed-door testimony, like this blockbuster testimony we got from James Baker today, like Strzok and Page that we've already had. Many more people. Then we've got the 302s. We got the FISA applications. We got Gang of 8 information. On top of that, you've got the Inspector General Horowitz, his investigation into FISA abuse. And whatever John Uber is doing, I guess, is anybody's guess at this point, supposedly looking into leaking, but, nobody's heard from him in months. I don't know if he's maybe on a sabbatical. We're waiting breathlessly for his report. All right, as we continue. All right, so we got criminal referrals, Mueller report coming, Gang of 8, 302s, FISA applications, and now we're getting more and more of these depositions and the Freedom of Information Act requests. This information, though, today, between Barr's testimony and the James Baker testimony that was released by Congressman Collins, I'm looking at this, and he's basically saying, I had to argue with the FBI, and I'm the general counsel, the top FBI lawyer, about how Hillary broke the law.
He knew she broke the law. He knew the statute. And he knew that Loretta Lynch and Obama were forcing the DOJ to instruct the FBI to ignore the law and create a new legal standard to exonerate Hillary Clinton. Isn't it interesting, Sean, that almost every day new information emerges that that tells us more and more about the level of corruption that took place here. That's how cover-ups work. The evidence is slow to emerge.
And what are your thoughts on the fact that all of this was able to take place and everybody at the highest levels of the FBI knew, for example, about the Hillary bought and paid for, Russian dossier, and that they used it? They all knew that that was not a valid document. It was unverifiable. David Schoen.
It should be shocking to absolutely everyone. And by the way, this stuff was only uncovered through your offices, quite frankly. And we're only starting to get the information, I think. You want to know an even scarier thought? An earlier FBI general counsel was Andrew Weissman. Can you imagine if he had been general counsel here, as bad as Baker was? And maybe that's what set the tone over there and got the message around. I want to say one last thing, if I may, about the Barr testimony. Congressman Nadler is pulling a scam on the American public by positioning this thing as if Barr or anyone else is trying to withhold something unduly from him. He keeps writing these letters and saying these generalities that Congress is always entitled to this and gets sensitive information all the time. There's a fundamental principle in the law that the specific statute overrides the other. This report by statute is to be kept confidential.
I'll read more of this on the other side. We'll continue.